My name is Diane Kaufman. I am 66 years old. I want to tell you something today, something that took me an embarrassingly long time to understand. I will tell it the way it actually happened, because there is a version of this story where I look entirely put together and wise. That is not the one I am telling today. When you spend 4 decades building a career, running businesses and managing people, everyone sells you on the exact same dream. They sell it to you in glossy brochures from wealth management firms. They sell it to you over expensive lunches when you are discussing exit strategies with your partners. They tell you that retirement is just one endless, uninterrupted Saturday. You finally have your savings secured in a bank account. You have navigated Medicare and all the endless paperwork that comes with getting older. Your investment portfolio is finally generating what it needs to generate. Your adult children are out of the house. They are paying their own mortgages. They are living their own lives. The calendar is completely clear for the first time in your adult life. You are supposed to wake up on that first Monday morning and feel nothing but absolute profound relief. You are supposed to pour a second cup of coffee and revel in the fact that nobody needs you to make a decision today. You are supposed to have it all figured out by the time you reach this age. You are supposed to know exactly how to relax. But nobody teaches you how to power down a machine that has been running at full capacity for 40 years. They just unplug it and expect it to be fine. I bought into that idea completely. I built businesses. I worked for other people in my 20s. I learned everything I could from 2 bosses I respected and 1 I didn't. The worst boss I ever had taught me the most. I have never told him that. I started a service business in my 30s. It was unglamorous and it worked. I managed 12 assistants at one point. I was very good at it. I was so exhausted by the end of it that the idea of an endless Saturday sounded like absolute heaven. I sold the business. I took the capital and moved into helping other women build what I had already built. I was the person I wish I had at 32. By the time I reached my 60s, I was ready to stop. But here is what I actually think. The endless Saturday is a complete myth, and it is a dangerous one, because a Saturday only feels good when it is sitting right next to a Friday. When you remove the work, you remove the contrast, and suddenly all that beautiful, unstructured time does not feel like freedom anymore. It just feels like a massive void. It feels like standing in a room after everyone else has left and realizing the room was yours and now it isn't. You wake up on a random Tuesday and the house is perfectly quiet. You drink your coffee in the kitchen. You read the morning paper from front to back. You wash the mug. You look at the clock on the wall and it is only 9 in the morning. And that feels incredibly strange. Not good weird, just weird. You realize you have 14 waking hours ahead of you to fill, and you have to do this again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. The panic starts to set in. It is a very quiet, very polite kind of panic. You realize you had the financial structure right. You hired the right accountants. The calendar cleared exactly on schedule. But you did not account for who you were without the work. I was good at the work. I was very good at it, and I had built so much of myself around being good at it that when it stopped, I didn't know what the rest of me was for. I am not going to give you a 5-step system for finding your purpose. I don't believe in those. I have tried them. I am not going to tell you to take up watercolor painting or join a committee. I am just going to tell you what happened to me and what we finally figured out when the quiet of the house simply got too loud to ignore. It is a strange thing to be successful and entirely lost at the exact same time. It is a contradiction that nobody warns you about when they are handing you the gold watch. I was getting dressed for what I thought was a business dinner. This was a few months after I had officially stepped down from consulting. I went into my closet and I bypassed the comfortable clothes. I bypassed the linen. I went straight for a specific navy blazer. The wool was heavy. It was the kind of blazer that acts like armor when you are walking into a room full of people who want something from you. I put it on. I stood in the bedroom and looked in the tall mirror. I was running through the conversation points in my head. I was actively preparing my arguments for a negotiation I assumed was happening. I was ready to defend a position. I was sharp. I was focused. And then I checked my calendar to confirm the reservation at the restaurant. I realized I had nowhere to be. The dinner I was preparing for was actually 3 weeks ago. I had written it in the wrong week. I had rushed to get ready for a meeting that did not exist. I stood there in the bedroom for 10 solid minutes, fully dressed in fine wool, with absolutely nowhere to go. I felt completely foolish. Then I sat down on the edge of the bed and I laughed. Then I cried a little bit. Then I was fine. That was the day I truly understood what transition actually means. It is not a date you write on a calendar. It is not a retirement party with a catered lunch and a polite speech. It is a Tuesday when you are overdressed for nothing. Richard noticed before I did. Richard is my husband. He said, very carefully, that I wasn't bored. He said I was lost. He told me those aren't the same thing. I didn't speak to him for 2 hours after that. Then I came back into the room and told him he was right. That was the beginning of figuring it out. So I want to go through 6 things I have noticed about this transition. 6 things about the reality of unstructured time. Things I wish someone had told me before I spent my first 6 months of retirement feeling like I was failing at it. I am not a consultant anymore. I am someone who has been through it. Those are different things, and I try not to confuse them. The first thing I noticed is the massive difference between stopping because you are finished and stopping because you decided you were done. I worked for decades. I built things and I lost things. I made a business decision at 44 that cost me 2 years and more money than I am going to say. I trusted a partner I should have looked at much harder. I ignored my own instincts because the spreadsheet looked promising. When it all fell apart, I had to sit at the kitchen table and tell Richard what I had done. Richard said 4 words when I told him about the massive loss. He said, "Okay, now what?" That is the only business advice I have ever needed. I rebuilt from that failure. It took years. When I finally decided to step away in my 60s, I thought I was choosing freedom. There is a difference between stopping because you are exhausted and stopping because you choose to. I wanted the second one. It took longer to get there than I expected, but I was actually just creating a massive vacuum in my own life. I had a Tuesday morning about 4 months in. I was sitting on the terrace of our home in Florida. I had a cup of coffee. The weather was absolutely perfect. The kind of weather people pay thousands of dollars to sit in for a week, and I felt entirely useless. I was used to managing heavy budgets. I was used to negotiating complex contracts. Now I was managing a grocery list and a watering schedule for the patio plants. I tried to fill the time with forced hobbies. I bought expensive gardening equipment. I do not even like gardening. I hired a landscaping company 2 weeks later. There is a version of this story where I look good. That is not the one I am telling. I was trying to buy my way out of the void, but you cannot hobby your way out of a lost identity. The realization hit me when I saw our daughter Sophie. She is 37. She is married to Adam. They have 2 children. Noah is 9 and Claire is 6. Noah negotiates everything. He reminds me of my father. Claire is going to be either a lawyer or a problem, possibly both. Sophie is building her own business now. She came over completely exhausted one afternoon. She dropped her bag on the floor and slumped into a chair. I wanted to step in and fix her operational problems. I wanted to give her a detailed list of advice, but I held back. I learned that the hard way. I realized I was trying to do her work just to feel the high of solving a problem. That is when I figured out you cannot borrow someone else's stress to feel important. You have to learn how to sit with the quiet, and it is incredibly uncomfortable at first. You have to endure the discomfort until it becomes normal. The second thing is how retirement completely changes the geometry of your marriage. Richard retired 3 years before I did. He is quieter than I am. He is steady. He is the kind of man who has always known exactly who he is. That used to frustrate me deeply when we were younger. I always felt like I had to prove my worth, and he just existed comfortably in his own skin. Now I consider it one of his best qualities. He was fine immediately after he retired, just fine. He figured out retirement in about 6 weeks. He found a routine, he found a rhythm. I watched him do it from across the room for 3 years with great confusion and occasional resentment. He never mentioned it, he never rubbed it in. That is probably why we are still married. When I finally stopped working, we were suddenly in the same house, all day, every day. Richard and I built our life around 2 people who were both very busy. We operated like passing ships for decades. I was traveling for client meetings. He was managing his own career. We coordinated our schedules like air traffic controllers. Now we had to build a life around 2 people who are just here. That is an entirely different project. One morning I walked into the sitting room. It is a nice room, neutral tones, real art on the walls. Richard was reading a biography. He was sitting in my favorite chair near the window. I felt a flash of actual annoyance. Because it was 11 in the morning on a Thursday, and I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing with myself. So I tried to manage him. I asked him what his plan for the day was. I used my best executive voice, the voice I used when a project was behind schedule. He looked over his glasses at me. He didn't blink. He said he didn't have a plan. He said he might take a walk later. He said he might just read. I felt my chest tighten. I was projecting my own anxiety about unstructured time onto a man who was perfectly content. I had to learn how to stop being the boss in my own living room. That cost me something. It was an ego adjustment. It was worth it. You have to stop treating your spouse like an employee who needs an annual performance review. You have to learn how to share the quiet space without trying to constantly organize it. You have to let them exist in the house without requiring a status update. The third thing is the strange, quiet grief of losing your professional title. I am not going to pretend I didn't like being important. I liked it. When I went to dinner parties in my 50s, people invariably asked what I did. I tell people I helped businesses grow. That is accurate. It is also not the whole story, but it is the part that is useful in a dinner conversation. The rest takes much longer to explain. Now, when people ask me what I do, I hesitate. The first few times I said I was retired, I physically cringed. I hated the word. It felt like I was admitting a defeat, like I had voluntarily stepped off the board entirely. I went to a charity function with Richard last year. It was a nice event. We were standing near the bar holding terribly expensive drinks. I was introduced to a much younger woman. She asked me what I did. I didn't give her my old credentials. I just said I was retired. Her eyes glazed over immediately. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. She looked over my shoulder to find someone more useful to talk to in the room. 20 years ago, I would have been deeply offended. I would have found a way to subtly insert my net worth or my past achievements into the conversation just to watch her posture change. That night I actually found it hilarious, because I remembered being her. I remembered measuring people by their utility in the room. There weren't many of us in certain rooms back then. I remember which rooms. I remember what it cost to stay in them. I remember the late nights and the missed family dinners. I missed things. I was traveling when Sophie had her school play. I was on a call when Richard needed me to just sit still. I made choices. I don't pretend they were free. I stopped trying to look successful around 48. That is when I actually started to feel it. Now I don't need the title to know what I built. The anonymity is actually a massive luxury, but it takes a very long time to stop craving the validation. You have to detox from the applause of your peers. That is when I figured out that nobody is actually thinking about your career legacy except you. The rest of the world moves on immediately, and that is incredibly freeing once you actually accept it. You are no longer required to be impressive to strangers. The fourth thing is learning the massive difference between elegance and performance. My mother was elegant without effort. I have to work at it. She never understood why. My mother never ran a business. She never managed a team of employees. She never had to fire anyone or negotiate a commercial lease. She ran a household on very little money, raised 2 children, and always looked like she had a full night's sleep. I have had all the resources she didn't have. I have rarely managed to look as composed. When I first retired, I thought I had to perform the role of the leisurely woman of means. I thought that was what came next. I bought beautiful linen trousers. I sat on the terrace in the morning and tried to look serene. It was absolutely exhausting. I was treating relaxation like it was a brand new corporate objective that I had to master. I remember sitting there one Tuesday trying to read a heavy historical novel because I thought that was what retired people did. I was miserable. I put the book down and went inside the house. I started organizing the hall closet. I pulled out every winter coat and wiped down the shelves. I threw away old umbrellas. I color coordinated the scarves, and I finally felt relaxed. I had a business coach in my 40s who told me I needed to be more vulnerable with my team. I fired him. In retrospect, he wasn't entirely wrong. I was always guarding myself. I was always performing competence. That is when I figured out that true elegance is just the complete absence of pretending. Elegance is knowing exactly who you are and not apologizing for it. My mother was elegant with nothing. That is the version worth studying. She did not perform for anyone. If you are someone who likes to organize closets, then organize them. You do not have to perform stillness if stillness makes you incredibly anxious. I don't fully understand why, but accepting my own restless, difficult nature made the days feel much longer. In a very good way. I stopped trying to perform retirement and just started living it. I allowed myself to be precisely who I am, and who I am is someone who needs to be moving. The fifth thing is realizing that money does not solve the Tuesday problem. The money is real. I am not going to pretend otherwise. My accountant knows the numbers. You don't need to. What I will tell you is that money is not the thing I want to talk about. I live well. We have a home in Florida. We travel when it suits us. I do not fly commercial if I can avoid it. I do not explain this or apologize for it. I spent 20 years in middle seats. I have graduated. But money just makes the scenery nicer while you figure out who you are. The problems look different in a nicer setting. They are still the exact same problems. I have what I worked for, and the questions I have now are not the ones I expected to have. There is a version of yourself you think you will become when you finally have enough. And then you have enough, and you are still exactly yourself. That was the most useful disappointment of my life. You still have to wake up and decide what matters today. You still have to find a reason to put your shoes on in the morning. The bank account cannot make those daily decisions for you. I spent years thinking my net worth was a direct proxy for my self-worth. When the work stops, that illusion completely shatters, and you are left with just the person in the mirror. You have to learn to like that person when she isn't producing anything of financial value. That is the hardest work I have ever done. It is much harder than scaling a business because you cannot outsource it. You cannot hire an assistant to find your meaning for you. My father was an accountant. He was precise and careful. He was a good man. I got my financial instincts from him. He knew how to balance a ledger perfectly, but even he struggled to balance his time when he stopped working. He would sit in his chair and look lost. Our son Jonathan works in finance in New York. He is 40 years old. Jonathan is better at money than I am. I take no credit for that. He is occasionally too direct with me, and I love that about him. I look at him working so hard now, grinding through the weeks, and I just want to tell him to prepare his mind for the quiet later, because the quiet is coming, and the portfolio will not protect you from the silence. The last thing I want to mention is the rhythm of the week. There is a rhythm to the week that you completely lose when you stop working. For decades, Friday nights were a very specific kind of sanctuary for me. We would light the candles. We would have the Shabbat dinner. It was a hard, immovable boundary in my schedule. The phones went away. The emails stopped. The business simply had to wait until Monday morning. It was the one time in the week when I allowed myself to completely exhale. The contrast between the pressure of Thursday afternoon and the quiet of Friday night was profound. But when you are retired, every single day feels like a Thursday afternoon with no actual pressure, or a Friday night with no actual relief. The boundaries blur completely. You have to invent your own borders for the week. My grandmother came here with a single suitcase and a very specific opinion about how a woman should carry herself. I think about that often. She observed the Sabbath with a rigidity that I did not understand when I was younger. I thought it was just tradition. But I think about her often now. She understood that time without structure is not freedom. It is just a very slow kind of chaos. And you have to put stakes in the ground to keep the days from bleeding into each other. If you don't create your own weekends, the endless Saturday will slowly drive you mad. You have to decide when the work of figuring out your life stops and when the rest actually begins. I am not going to tell you I have it completely figured out. I would say I have made progress. I know the difference between moving forward and standing still while looking forward. I am trying to actually move. Some days the unstructured time feels beautiful. Some days I still look at my phone waiting for a crisis to solve. I still feel the phantom weight of the business, but mostly the rhythm has settled. I am learning to appreciate a Tuesday that is just a Tuesday, without needing it to be a productive stepping stone to something else. And I think that is worth something. It is a quiet victory, but it is real. You have to be patient with yourself while you build a new structure. It does not happen overnight. It takes seasons. It takes a willingness to admit that you don't have all the answers, even if you were the person everyone used to ask. If something in here landed for you, leave a comment down below. I read them. Tell me about the hardest part of walking away from your professional identity. What did you miss that you didn't expect to miss? Did you miss the title, the emails, the problems? I find these comments useful, more useful than I expected to. It helps to see how other people navigate the space after the work stops. I will do a follow-up on this topic soon. Subscribe if you want to see it. That is all for today. Take care of yourselves.